One day, a man said something that changed my life forever. He said, "Show me what you complain about every day, and I'll show you the prison you live in." Think about that. Not your job, not your past, not people. Your complaints. Because the truth is uncomfortable, but powerful. The moment you stop complaining, life doesn't magically change. You do, and when you change, everything around you starts responding. Today, I want to talk about the day your life truly begins. The day you stop wasting your energy on complaints and start using it to build your future. The first key point is this: complaining trains your mind to see only what's wrong. It slowly programs your attention like a camera that has been tilted slightly downward. You don't even notice it at first. You wake up, check your phone, sigh about the weather, the messages, the news. A small comment here, a small irritation there. It feels harmless. But your brain is listening, it is taking notes. It begins to believe that your job is to scan for flaws, to highlight what is missing, to underline what is unfair. And once that habit settles in, even a beautiful day feels incomplete. Even a good opportunity looks risky. Even kind people seem suspicious. The world has not changed. Your filter has. Think of a man who walks into a garden with the magnifying glass. If he bends down and studies only the dry leaves, he will leave convinced the garden is dying. But if he lifts his head, he will see roses opening, bees working, sunlight touching everything gently. Complaining is that magnifying glass stuck on the dry leaves. The mind begins to search for proof that things are bad. It becomes skilled at it. You get promoted, but you focus on the extra workload. You move to a new city, but you focus on what you miss. Someone compliments you, but you replay the one criticism. Over time, this is not just a reaction, it becomes your identity. You start saying, "That's just how I am. I'm a realistic." But realism is not the same as negativity. Realism sees the whole garden. I once met a woman who worked in a small office. Every morning she complained about the long commute, the traffic, the coffee, her manager's tone. She wasn't a bad person, she was just tired. But day after day, she told the same story about how hard everything was. After a year, something interesting happened. She stopped applying for better roles. She stopped volunteering for new projects. When I asked her why, she said, "It won't make a difference anyway." Her mind had been trained to expect a disappointment. She wasn't lazy, she was conditioned. Her brain had become so good at finding what was wrong that it could no longer imagine what might go right. Your mind is obedient. It follows the instructions you repeat. If you keep saying, "Nothing works out for me," your brain begins to collect evidence. It remembers the one failed attempt more clearly than the 5 small wins. It reminds you of the rejection but forgets the progress. It edits your memories in a way that supports your complaint. And then you look at your life and say, "See, I was right." But you were not right. You were rehearsed. You practice seeing the negative until it felt natural. And what feels natural feels true, even when it is not complete. Imagine a young student who struggles in math. Every time he faces a problem, he mutters, "I'm bad at this." At first it's frustration, then it becomes belief. Soon, he doesn't even try to solve the harder questions. He skips them, not because he cannot learn, but because his mind has been trained to expect failure. Complaining about his weakness has strengthened it. Now, imagine the same student saying, "This is hard, but I can figure it out." The problem on the page is the same. The teacher is the same. The classroom is the same. But the lens is different. One lens shrinks possibility. The other expands it. You may not realize how deeply this runs. When you complain about people, your mind starts looking for their faults. When you complain about your body, your mind highlights every imperfection in the mirror. When you complain about your country, your mind ignores the chances you still have. Slowly, gratitude feels naive. Optimism feels foolish. Hope feels unrealistic. But this is not maturity, it is repetition. You have repeated the story of what is wrong so often that it has become the loudest voice in the room. And because it is loud, you assume it is wise. The day you begin to interrupt that pattern, something quiet but powerful happens. You notice small wins you used to ignore. You see effort where you once saw failure. You begin to ask different questions. Instead of, why is this always happening to me? You ask, what can this teach me? That single shift does not remove problems, but it changes how your brain approaches them. It stops searching only for cracks in the wall and starts looking for doors. And when your mind starts looking for doors, it begins to see pathways that were always there, waiting for you to lift your head and notice them. The second key point is this: complaining makes you feel busy, but it keeps you stuck. It gives you the illusion of movement without the courage of action. You talk about the problem, you analyze it, you repeat it to different people in different tones, on different days, and every time you speak about it, you feel a small release, like steam escaping from a kettle. It feels like progress. It feels like you've done something. But when the conversation ends, nothing has changed. The same problem is waiting. The same decision is still undone. Complaining is like running on a treadmill. You sweat, you breathe heavy, but you remain in the same place. There was a man I once knew who wanted to start his own business. For 3 years, he talked about it. He complained about his boss, about the low salary, about how unfair the system was. Every lunch break became a small speech about how he deserved more. He had ideas, he had energy, he had time, but he also had comfort in his complaints. As long as he was talking about what was wrong, he didn't have to face the fear of starting. Complaining became his shield. It protected him from the risk of failure, because once you take action, the outcome becomes real. As long as you only complain, everything stays hypothetical. You may not realize it, but complaining can be a hiding place. It allows you to stay in the role of the victim, and there is strange safety in that role. When you are the victim, you don't have to take responsibility. You don't have to stretch. You don't have to risk embarrassment. You can point outward and say, they are the reason. But the moment you shift from complaint to action, the spotlight turns inward. Now the question becomes, what am I going to do about it? And that question is heavier. It demands courage. It demands effort. It demands change. Think of a person who constantly complains about being unhealthy. They talk about their weight, their tiredness, their lack of energy. They read articles. They watch videos. They discuss diets with friends. It feels like they are engaged in the process of change. But weeks pass, months pass, and their routine remains the same. The talking created the feeling of involvement without the discomfort of discipline. Real progress is quiet. It happens in early mornings, in small choices, in consistent effort. Complaining is loud. It fills the room, but it produces nothing tangible. Sometimes we confuse emotional express science with action. There is nothing wrong with acknowledging pain. There is nothing wrong with saying something is difficult. But when expression turns into repetition and repetition turns into identity, you build a loop. You wake up, relive the same frustration, repeat the same sentences, and go to sleep unchanged. It is like watching the same episode of a show every night and expecting a new ending. The script does not change because you have not changed your response to it. I remember a young woman who felt stuck in a relationship that drained her. She complained about her partner's behavior to everyone around her. She described every argument in detail. She knew exactly what was wrong. But when someone gently asked, "So what are you going to do?" she became quiet. That question felt heavier than all her stories. Because action meant making a decision. It meant facing loneliness, uncertainty, maybe even criticism. Complaining allowed her to stay in the familiar discomfort rather than step into an unfamiliar freedom. Your life does not shift because of how many times you describe the problem. It shifts when you move differently. When you replace 1 hour of talking with 1 hour of learning. When you replace one complaint with one phone call. When you replace one excuse with one small attempt. Action may feel small at first. It may feel awkward, but it creates momentum. Complaining drains momentum. It keeps you mentally active but physically and emotionally stationary. And if you listen closely, you will notice that the energy you spend repeating your frustration could have been the same energy used to build a solution. The third key point is this. Every time you complain, you quietly give away your power. You may not see it happening, but it happens in small, invisible exchanges. You speak about a situation as if it controls you. You describe a person as if they determine your mood. You repeat a story from your past as if it still owns your future. And with every sentence, you hand over authority. It is like signing tiny contracts throughout the day, agreeing that your peace depends on circumstances behaving exactly the way you want. The moment they don't, your stability shakes. Not because life is stronger than you, but because you placed it above you. Imagine your inner strength as a battery. Every complaint is a device plugged into it. You talk about traffic, your energy drops. You replay a hurtful comment, your energy drops. Again, you blame the economy, your upbringing, your bad luck. By evening, you feel drained. You call it exhaustion from work. But much of it came from mental surrender. When you complain, you are telling your mind, "I am at the mercy of this." And your mind obeys. It lowers your posture. It softens your voice. It narrows your options. You begin to act smaller than you are. There was a young athlete who lost an important game. For weeks, he complained about the referee's bad call. He replayed the moment again and again, convincing himself that the loss was stolen from him. At first, people agreed. They sympathized. But slowly, something changed. His training lost intensity. His focus faded. Because deep inside, he had decided that outcomes were controlled by others. When he stepped onto the field again, he carried that belief. He hesitated, he doubted, and hesitation is expensive. The real loss was not the game. It was the confidence he surrendered by placing power in the referee's whistle. When you complain about someone's behavior, you often give them control over your emotional climate. If they are kind, you are calm. If they are cold, you are disturbed. If they approve, you feel worthy. If they criticize, you feel broken. This is a fragile way to live. It is like building your house on rented land. At any moment, someone else can change the rules. True strength begins when you realize that while you cannot control every action around you, you can control your response. That shift may sound simple, but it is profound. That means your mood is not for sale. I once met a woman who had grown up in a difficult home. For years she complained about her childhood, and she had every reason to feel pain. But as she grew older, she noticed something painful. She was using her past as permission to stay stuck. Whenever she faced a challenge, she would say, "You don't understand what I've been through." Her story was real. Her hurt was real. But so was her present. The day she decided that her past would explain her, not define her, something shifted. She stopped giving yesterday the authority to dictate today. She reclaimed ownership over her choices. Power does not always look loud. It is not about dominating others or pretending problems do not exist. It is quiet, it is steady. It is the decision to say, this situation may be hard, but it does not get to decide who I become. When you complain constantly, you shrink your role in your own life. You become a side character reacting to events. When you stop, you step back into the center. You begin asking different questions. Instead of, why is this happening to me? You ask, who do I choose to be in this moment? That question brings power back into your hands. There is a deep freedom in realizing that responsibility is not a burden but a privilege. If everything is someone else's fault, you are trapped. But if even a small part is within your control, you have leverage. You have room to move. Complaining feels justified, especially when life is unfair, but fairness is not always guaranteed. Growth begins when you refuse to surrender your inner authority to outer chaos. Every time you choose ownership over complaint, you strengthen something inside you that no person, no failure, no memory can easily take away. The fourth key point is this: complaining keeps you emotionally poor. You may have money in your bank account, skills in your hands, degrees on your wall, but inside you feel empty, not because life has given you nothing, but because your mind has learned to focus on what is missing. Emotional wealth is not about how perfect your life looks. It is about how deeply you can appreciate what is already present. When complaining becomes your daily language, appreciation slowly disappears. You stop tasting your food. You stop noticing the sky. You stop valuing the people who show up for you. Everything becomes ordinary. And when everything feels ordinary, nothing feels meaningful. Emotional poverty does not announce itself loudly. It shows up in small ways. You achieve something you once prayed for, and within minutes, your mind jumps to the next thing that is lacking. You buy something new, and instead of enjoying it, you compare it to something better. You meet someone kind, but you focus on the one flaw they have. It is like trying to fill a cup that has a small hole at the bottom. No matter how much you pour in, it never feels full. Complaining creates that hole. It leaks joy quietly, day after day. I once met a man who had built a successful career. Nice house, respect in his community, financial stability. But when you sat with him, all he spoke about were the inconveniences. The taxes were too high. His neighbors were too noisy. His employees were not grateful enough. He had everything he once struggled for, yet he felt constantly dissatisfied. One evening, his young daughter drew a picture of their family standing in front of their home. Above them, she wrote, "I love our life." He looked at it and said, "She sees something I don't." That moment shook him. He realized that his complaints had made him blind to the very blessings he worked so hard to create. Gratitude is not pretending that life is perfect. It is choosing to notice what is working while you improve what is not. When you complain constantly, you train your heart to measure life by its gaps instead of its gifts. And over time, that measurement becomes your standard. You wake up always scanning for what will go wrong. You enter conversations expecting disappointment. You approach opportunities expecting disappointment. Emotional poverty grows, not because life is empty, but because your attention is narrow. Think about how a child reacts to simple things: a balloon, a warm cookie, a short walk in the park. The joy is real because the mind is open. As we grow older, responsibilities increase, pressure builds, and somewhere along the way, we start believing that appreciation is childish. We become serious, we become critical, we become efficient, but in the process, we lose softness. Complaining feels mature because it sounds analytical. But constant criticism without balance drains warmth from your spirit. It makes you heavy. It makes you tired in a way sleep cannot fix. There was a woman who worked two jobs to support her family. Her days were long and her energy was limited. She had every reason to complain. Yet when she spoke, she focused on the fact that her children were healthy, that she had the strength to work, that each paycheck, no matter how small, was progress. She was not denying her hardship. She was protecting her emotional wealth, and that protection gave her resilience. People around her felt encouraged, not burdened. Her gratitude did not erase her struggle, but it gave her dignity inside it. Emotional wealth is the ability to feel peace even while you are building more. It is the ability to enjoy the present while preparing for the future. When you stop complaining, you do not suddenly gain more possessions. You gain perspective. You begin to see that life is not just a list of problems to fix, but a series of moments to experience. And in those moments, you start noticing that what you already have may be more than you allowed yourself to see. The fifth key point is this: people do not rise around someone who constantly complains. Energy is contagious. You may not see it, but the atmosphere you carry enters the room before your words do. When you speak often about what is wrong, when you highlight flaws in every plan, when you focus on what could fail instead of what could work, people feel it. They may nod politely, they may even agree, but slowly they step back. Because no one grows well in heavy air. Just like plants lean toward sunlight, people lean toward possibility. Think about the last time you were excited about an idea. Maybe you wanted to start something new, take a risk, share a dream. Now, imagine sharing that idea with someone who immediately lists all the reasons it might fail. They may call it realism. They may say they are protecting you. But notice what happens inside you. Your shoulders drop. Your voice softens. The spark dims a little. Words have weight. And when someone constantly complains, their words add weight to everything around them. Over time, people stop bringing their ideas to them, not out of disrespect, but out of self-preservation. I once worked with a small team in an office where one person had the habit of pointing out problems in every meeting. Every suggestion was met with, "That won't work," or "We tried that before." At first it sounded experienced, but slowly meetings became quieter. Fewer people volunteered ideas. Creativity shrank. It was not because the team lacked talent. It was because the environment felt unsafe for optimism. When leadership eventually changed and a new Naga replaced criticism with curiosity, something shifted. The same people who were silent began speaking again. The talent had always been there. It simply needed encouragement, not constant doubt. Complaining can feel like bonding. Two people talking about how bad things are can feel connected. But that connection is fragile. It is built on shared frustration, not shared vision. And frustration eventually turns on itself. One day, the same person who complained with you will complain about you. Because the habit does not discriminate, it spreads. Strong relationships are built on trust, support, and growth. When you become someone who looks for solutions instead of faults, people feel safe around you. They feel stronger around you. They want to collaborate, not just vent. There was a father who came home from work every evening, exhausted and irritated. He complained about traffic, about his boss, about the economy. His children grew up listening to those conversations at the dinner table. Over time, they began to mimic him. They complained about school, about teachers, about chores. One day he noticed that his home felt tense. Everyone was frustrated. No one seemed grateful. It was a mirror. He realized that his tone had shaped the culture of his own family. When he slowly began shifting his words, acknowledging challenges, but also speaking about lessons and opportunities, the atmosphere changed, not overnight, but steadily. Because leadership is not about position, it is about influence. When you choose to stop complaining, you become rare. In a world where negativity is loud and easy, calm responsibility stands out. People trust those who do not panic at every inconvenience. They respect those who do not blame at every obstacle. It does not mean you ignore problems. It means you approach them with steadiness. And steadiness is magnetic. It draws people who want to grow. It builds teams that believe in progress. It creates friendships rooted in strength instead of shared helplessness. You may think your words do not matter that much, but they do. They shape how others see possibility. They shape how safe someone feels to dream in your presence. If your voice constantly highlights what is broken, people will protect their dreams from you. But if your voice carries balance, perspective, and constructive honesty, people will invite you into their plans. They will seek your input. They will rise, not shrink, when you speak. And that shift begins the moment you decide that your presence will add light, not shadow, to the spaces you enter. The sixth key point is this: complaining is a habit, not a personality. It may feel like this is just who I am, but it is not your identity. It is repetition. It is a pattern practiced so many times that it now feels natural. Think about how you learned to tie your shoes. At first, it was awkward, slow, confusing. Then one day, you did it without thinking. Complaining works the same way. You repeated certain thoughts, certain reactions, certain sentences until they became automatic. But automatic does not mean permanent. It simply means trained. Some people say, I'm just being honest. But honesty does not require constant negativity. Honesty can acknowledge difficulty without living inside it. If complaining were truly your personality, it would show up everywhere equally. But notice how selective it is. Around someone you deeply respect, you may choose your words carefully. Around someone optimistic, you may soften your tone. That means you already have control. The habit bends depending on and if it can bend, it can be reshaped. I remember a young man who grew up in a household where complaining was the main language. Every dinner conversation was about what was wrong: neighbors, politics, relatives' prices, weather. As a child, he absorbed it without realizing. In college, he found himself doing the same thing with his friends. One day, a close friend told him gently, "You always sound disappointed." That sentence stayed with him. He wasn't angry, he was shocked. He had never seen himself that way. That moment became a mirror. He realized he had inherited a habit, not a destiny. Breaking a habit feels uncomfortable because it interrupts familiarity. The first time you stop yourself mid-complaint, it feels strange. There is a pause, a silence. Your mind searches for its usual script, and you refuse to deliver it. That gap feels awkward, but inside that gap is freedom. It is the space where you choose your response instead of reacting automatically. Change does not require dramatic transformation. It begins with small interruptions: one less complaint today, one more solution-focused sentence tomorrow. Think of your mind as a path through a field. The more you walk the same route, the clearer it becomes. Complaining is a well-worn trail, easy to follow, no thinking required. Choosing a different response is like stepping into tall grass. At first it feels slow, you doubt whether it's worth it, but with repetition, a new path forms. Eventually, that new way of thinking becomes easier. You begin to respond with curiosity instead of criticism, with effort instead of excuses. The brain adapts to what you practice. There was a woman who used to complain every morning about her commute. Traffic, delays, crowded trains, it shaped her mood before her day even began. One week she decided to experiment. Instead of complaining, she used that time to listen to audiobooks. She learned new ideas, new perspectives. Within months, her commute felt different. The traffic was the same, the train was the same, but her experience had changed. Not because the world shifted, but because she interrupted a habit and replaced it with something intentional. You are not trapped by the patterns you learned. You are shaped by what you continue. If you keep feeding the habit of complaining, it grows stronger. If you challenge it consistently, it weakens. It may never disappear completely, but it no longer controls you. And the moment you realize that your reactions are trained responses, not fixed traits, you reclaim the ability to rewrite them. The seventh key point is this: the day you stop complaining is the day you step into adulthood. Not adulthood by age, not adulthood by legal definition, but adulthood definition, but adulthood in spirit. A child reacts to discomfort. An adult responds to reality. When a child falls, the first instinct is to look around and ask, "Who pushed me?" When an adult falls, the first instinct becomes, "How do I stand up?" That shift may seem small, but it marks the difference between living dependent on circumstances and living directed by choice. Complaining often feels natural because it is rooted in the desire for life to be fair. And that desire is understandable. You want effort to be rewarded. You want loyalty to be returned. You want plans to go smoothly. But adulthood begins when you understand that fairness is not guaranteed. Life is not a carefully managed classroom where everyone gets equal turns. Sometimes you will give more than you receive. Sometimes you will try and still fail. Complaining says, "This should not be happening." Maturity says, "This is happening. Now what?" There was a young professional who entered the workforce with high expectations. He believed hard work would always be noticed and talent would always be rewarded. When he was passed over for a promotion, he felt betrayed. For months, he complained about office politics, favoritism, and unfair treatment. Some of his concerns were valid, but during that time, he stopped improving his skills. He stopped building relationships. He waited for the system to correct itself. One evening, after a long conversation with a mentor, he heard something simple but sharp. "Whether it feste Virginia, sphere or not, it's still your move." That sentence changed him. He realized that maturity is not about denying injustice. It is about refusing to let injustice freeze you. Stepping into adulthood means accepting that responsibility is heavy but empowering. When you stop complaining, you stop waiting for rescue. You stop expecting someone else to fix your mood, your finances, your future. You begin asking harder questions. What can I learn from this? Where did I contribute to this situation? What skill do I need to develop? These questions are uncomfortable because they remove excuses, but they also open doors. As long as you are focused on who is to blame, your hands are empty. When you take responsibility, your hands become tools. I once met a single mother raising 2 children while working night shifts. She had every reason to complain. Her schedule was exhausting. Her resources were limited. But she made a quiet decision early on. She told herself, "My children will not grow up hearing me curse the life we have." Instead of framing her struggle as punishment, she framed it as purpose. She studied during her breaks. She saved small amounts consistently. Years later, when her children looked back, they did not remember a bitter home. They remembered strength. Adulthood is not about having fewer problems. It is about handling them with ownership instead of resentment. When you stop complaining, you also stop negotiating with reality. You stop saying, "I'll move forward when things are perfect." You move forward anyway. You stop measuring your effort against how easy it feels. You do what needs to be done because it needs to be done. That is maturity. It is waking up early when you don't feel like it. It is having difficult conversations instead of avoiding them. It is admitting mistakes without collapsing into shame. It is understanding that growth often feels inconvenient. There is a quiet dignity in this shift. You walk differently, you speak differently. Not because life has suddenly become gentle, but because you have become grounded. You understand that storms will come, and you no longer spend your energy shouting at the sky. You secure your house. You protect your foundation. You act. And in that action, you realize something powerful. Adulthood is not about losing your joy, it is about gaining control over how you respond to what you cannot control. There comes a quiet moment in every person's life when the noise settles. No audience, no applause, no one watching, just you and your thoughts. And in that moment, you realize something simple but life altering. The quality of your life is deeply connected to the quality of your responses. You may not control the traffic, the economy, the opinions of others, or the mistakes of your past, but you do control the lens through which you see them. You control the words you repeat. You control the story you tell yourself each morning. And that control, small as it may seem, is enough to reshape everything. When you stop complaining, you don't become passive. You become steady. You don't deny hardship. You face it without surrendering your peace. You don't pretend everything is perfect. You simply refuse to let imperfection define your attitude. And slowly, almost quietly, your life begins to feel different. Not because circumstances have dramatically shifted, but because you are no longer leaking energy through frustration and blame. You begin to notice that your mind feels clearer, your conversations feel lighter, your decisions feel stronger. You stand a little straighter, not out of pride, but out of ownership. You understand that every challenge is not an attack, every delay is not a disaster, every flaw is not a verdict on your worth. Life becomes something you participate in, not something you resist. There is strength in that realization. A grounded strength, the kind that does not shout but holds firm, the kind that does not need constant validation because it is rooted in responsibility. You stop waiting for life to become easier and you start becoming wiser. You stop demanding that the world change for you and you begin changing how you meet the world. And one day, without fanfare, you notice something remarkable. The problems that once consumed your thoughts no longer dominate your spirit. The complaints that once filled your conversations feel unnecessary. In their place is clarity. In their place is calm effort. In their place is a quiet confidence that says, whatever comes, I will handle it. That is the day your life truly begins to improve. Not because the road is smooth, but because you are walking it with awareness. Not because nothing goes wrong, but because you are no longer defined by what goes wrong. You move forward with intention. You speak with balance. You think with purpose. And as you step back into your life from this moment, carry this understanding with you. Your growth does not depend on perfect conditions. It depends on a disciplined mind and a willing heart. The shift is not loud. It is not dramatic. It is simply a decision made quietly and honored daily. From that decision, everything else begins to align.